welcome to another housing sector podcast. Today we have someone who is not only a resident but is also a health and safety professional, Mel Little. Mel, thank you very much indeed for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me on, Ben.
No, you're welcome, and it's good for. It's always great when people reach out and say, I've got some input, I've got a story, I've got something to say. So, look, you are currently um, with Birmingham City Council as a resident,
Correct, yeah.
and there are. So you're someone who definitely sees both sides of it. So, in your professional role, what is it that you're responsible for?
So I currently work for a housing association. I have a mix of health and safety experience, all of it within high risk, highly regulated industries and social housing, which is a mix of housing association and local authority. I currently deal with the occupational, so I'm dealing with it from the side of their staff and stress management and the risk that customers pose, etc. So I'm looking at it from that angle. But I've had quite a lot of experience in construction. So I know a fair bit about CDM and construction and how planned works. So I've put together CDM programs for housing associations and local authorities previously for their planned works.
Okay, before we get on to your story, you just sort of said something there that's really spiked my interest because quite often, the people in the customer service desks who are dealing with this, the impact on them, if they've got
It's
customers ringing up,
immense. Yeah,
yeah, saying my home's not safe, I don't think it is, and then they raise it internally and it doesn't get sorted, and then the following week, what is the impact on them? How are they coping with this?
the sector's at breaking point, to be honest. So there's a lot of work gone into how we're managing the risk to the employee current at my current employers. So we're looking at, and it goes beyond having your management programs in place. It's things like ensuring that there's full support, that they have got the ability to go away and vent. So one of the things that I know because of my experience from the other side in the sector is as an employee, they need the ability to go and rent and vent. Now that used to happen around the kettle. So you'd had a particularly tough call, you'd go and you'd meet your mate from over there and you'd have a conversation about how much of a nasty person Mr. So and so from number 22 at whatever it is. And you would go away feeling better. That's harder now we're in a remote environment. And that's to be expected. That's a stress relief. The problem comes in when they're putting things in writing or they're making it clear to the customers when they're speaking to them that they hold them in contempt. So there's no issue with you having your little vent, everybody does. It's when you then translate that and make that so that that goes across and the customer's aware of it.
Yeah, and obviously that comes into problems when there's subject access requests and all of that. So,
Exactly.
and they shouldn't be putting things in writing because, quite often you have a vent and you say things and it is just a vent
You
that ain't.
don't mean them. You're just having an event. Exactly.
Yeah,
The issue we've got with my current landlord, well, Birmingham City Council, is it's not just that they're having an event. Every single interaction that I've had with them, they are contemptuous. They hold their customers in contempt. Every single interaction. I had another email through this morning, which I'll touch on in a little while. Again, contempt, and it's because I've worked in the industry. I know that's not normal.
yeah. You see, I also say my landlord has nothing but contempt for many of its residents, and I get that echoed, and I hear that
Yeah.
from other people as well. But it's interesting to hear that you don't think that that's the norm.
It's not, no. There are most, it may well be for local authorities, but most housing associations will have dedicated departments where they're looking at how they communicate with the customer. And there'll be phrases that you weave in conversation and they'll be listening to and monitoring calls and there'll be feedback on how that call went. And that's for both, it's both for the protection of the resident, the customer, and for protection of the employee because I I deal with the antisocial behaviour, so I have a lot of poor, in tears members of staff who have been incredibly badly verbally abused by a customer because they're at the end of their rope and their tether, and sometimes they're just not very nice people. And they're dealing with a large volume of, and people are getting very angry because repairs aren't being done as quickly as they'd like, or any of the other bits and pieces. So it's how you think about how they're going to cope with that. And when you get a high volume, it hurts. So I'll listen to, I can get access to some of the calls just so that I can get a feel for what's triggered it, so you can look at how you can stop that from happening again. That's in my professional role.
See, that's here we go. These conversations always go down different routes, and that's really interesting to hear. And I know there are buzz phrases and stuff, and there must be that fatigue that happens when you're
Yeah.
getting. And I have part of my thing is I set up a complaints portal for Green Square Cause, and I would get so many, and I still do to this day. I get, oh no, something rubbish, you rubbish. Okay, what's the core point? Because we
Why?
can't just
Yeah.
say you're shit and rubbish. We need to gear that into a more professional sounding way. Oh, they're just rubbish. I can't deal with that. I can't work with that. So a customer service desk must get thousands of these.
And yes, they're in. It's in crisis. It's a very difficult role, and that's something that I always remember because I work on this side, so I remember. So I'm always very courteous and give them the information I know they're going to need. What that does, though, is with the case of Birmingham City Council and also West Midlands Fire Service, it breeds distrust because they don't understand how I know what they need.
Right. Okay. Let's get back on track a little bit. So behind you are pictures of fire doors.
Yes, these are fire doors that passed a quarterly audit in April in my building. So, following the Birmingham City Council's decision to put a compound across from, I live in a high rise block, a HRB. So I live in a high rise block. It's 9 stories tall and it's 23 meters. They put it's at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac. So obviously part of the fire safety strategy would be that the road is kept clear so that double yellows were put outside of the block to make sure that fire engines and emergency services have got full access. This compound meant that there were contractors because obviously they're just going to work, so they're just park here and running. They're doing that, so there was no way anybody could get up and down the road. So I called the council and I spoke to the housing officer, who was incredibly rude and accused me of lying. What that did was that meant, because again I'm lucky in as much as I have the skills that most tenants wouldn't have because of my knowledge, because of what I do for a living. So I went back and requested various pieces of information. So everything around the CDM, and also I wanted the fire safety strategy, a copy of the summary safety case file, everything that I should be able to see under the Building Safety Act for my block. I still haven't had it. What I
What
got
is
was a fire.
what is the
Sorry.
time frame? And well, first of all, what's for everyone that's listening and watching, what is a CDM and what is the sort of legal time frame?
Okay, so the CDM section, that's construction design and maintenance, and that's regulations that came in 2015, and it specifically relates to any works that you might be doing. So for social housing, kitchens and bathrooms planned works falls under that, and that's what they've set up a compound for. And anybody that's in that area has the right to see things such as their F10, which is when they've notified it to the council to say that they're going to be doing it, and a copy of their CPP, which is construction phase plan, so you can see how they're going to manage the risk to residents in the area and how they're going to manage the risk to their employees. So that's all information that I was legally allowed to see. And because I live in a HRB and because they'd obviously not thought about that, I asked for all of the stuff that I'm entitled to see under the Building Safety Act for this building.
And you haven't received it.
What I received was a redacted fire risk assessment and a very poor quarterly inspection of the fire doors. What I then did, again, because I do this for a living, is I did a line by line dissection on the fire risk assessment, and I went and I did my own audit. So I've audited 49 communal doors in this building. I haven't looked at the riser doors and I haven't looked at the electrical cupboards. And the findings I've got from the fire risk assessment and also the quarterly audit that they did. Firstly, none of the doors that are on either of these documents that the council produced match the asset numbers in this building. They didn't look at 49 doors. They looked at 9 in total. They so they didn't look at all of the doors. They asset numbers don't match. They signed the building. The individual who completed the fire risk assessment couldn't decide whether it was a supported living, retirement living block, or it was a general needs block. So he references both throughout, very different needs. He hadn't looked at the external wall survey, which is something that they have to do following Grenfell because of the cladding. He'd not looked at the fire doors. What you should do for a HRB of this size and this any HRB, it needs
And just for everyone, a HRB is high-rise building.
correct, yeah. So anything that's more than 7 stories tall and has 2 residential units, or 23 meters tall, or 19 meters tall. Sorry, it's with 23 meters. That's where that came from. Is a HRB, and it needs to be registered with the building safety regulator. This building is registered. Part of the documentation that came back from the council when I was continuing to complain, and I've gone through the stage 2 complaints process, and it's now with the ombudsman, was they came back to me and said, it isn't a HRRB, so we don't need to do any of the remedial works. We're committed to fire safety. And I sent the screenshot of it registered with the building safety regulator to my local council, who's been very involved. I've got to say that Gareth Moore's been very, very helpful. He's been incredibly involved, along with a friend of ours, Julie Hambleton, who's been supporting me with this. In fact, Gareth came in with a walk round with me yesterday, and I showed him the doors. So he's saying, he came back to me with, they're saying it isn't. Have you got anything, Mel, that proves it? I was like, you mean like the fact they've registered it?
Yeah.
There you go. So it then went up to the next level up. Now, because it's very bureaucratic, it's local government, it's very difficult to figure out what the actual organisation chart looks like. So it's gone to another director of housing, who's come back with, yes, actually, it is a HRB. Sorry for any confusion. No, I was never confused. You were. You were. I know what it is. I live in it. So far, what we've got 49 doors where you've got failed seats. You can see the state of them. They're not even the worst, that they're signing off as perfectly safe. Now, Grenfell, there were 2 reasons why that fire spread. It spread on the outside because of the cladding, and it spread on the inside because of the fire doors. Compartmentation failed because the fire doors were in that sort of state. And it had the same policy as the property I live in has, which is a stay put policy. Stay put policies work if your compartmentation is strong. If your compartmentation isn't strong, you need to be moving to it's called a simultaneous evacuation policy. And it means you've got fire alarms in all of the communal areas. You hear the fire alarm, and anybody who's able to leaves. And there's in the box that's got for the fire service, anybody that's not going to be able to self-evacuate, the information on how the fire service have to get them out, what their vulnerabilities are, is in that box. Birmingham City Council fail on several points. They don't have a PEEP programme. So it might be called PEEP, it might be called PCFRA. And it's basically just this person has, their mobility issues are such, you're going to need to do X, Y, and Z to get them out. They don't have that. So there are people that this block is an over 50s block, and a lot of the residents of this block have mobility issues. So there's no way of knowing how they're going to get people out. It also leads to the issue of us having a lot of mobility scooters on communal landings, because it's 1 and 2 bedroom flats. They're not going to be anywhere else other than on the communal landings. So we've got unstable batteries, because that's what lithium-ion are, in communal areas with no compartmentation and a stay put policy. And what I get is spoken to with utter contempt, the runaround, and at no stage are they actually acknowledging. And I've said all the way along, I do this for a living. I do this for a living.
Why do you think? I mean, I'm shocked that first of all you should have got a redacted report, because this isn't Watergate. What could possibly be in there that needs redacting? And why are they not going, actually, here's someone who knows what they're talking about. This is someone, and I felt this when dealing with my own landlord. We've got someone that's clearly engaged and clearly can help us to better our service and make our residents safe. Why aren't they listening to you? Why are they treating you in such a way?
I think there are potentially a couple of reasons why that might be the case. So reason number one would be that they have a lack of competence. They don't understand what their duties are under the Building Safety Act. And reason number two is Birmingham City Council is in a section 114. It's declared bankruptcy. It needs
Mm.
to make savings of 300 million. Now, what they're currently doing is they're targeting the private landlords. So Birmingham City Council, in conjunction with West Midlands Fire Service, are going out to all of the private landlords and they are issuing them with notices. The revenue for that, if it's civil, goes to Birmingham City Council. Whereas to actually properly audit and not just have what is compliance theatre, the fire risk assessment I received is compliance theatre because it isn't the right level. He contradicts himself throughout it. He hasn't looked at it, should be an intrusive survey, which means they're going to the flats, they're checking what the state of the building is because you're looking to make sure there is no way that fire can spread. None of that was done, but it's signed off as moderate risk. So the fire risk assessor has signed this building off, and Birmingham City Council have gone, I've got a lovely bit of paper here that says we've done a fire risk assessment, tick, but they're not looking at it. And they're not used to this level of detail. So West Midlands Fire Service, I requested a fire safety audit. Again, you're legally allowed to do that. I requested it through the portal. They contacted Birmingham City Council and said fix the doors. So I was like, fair enough. And I was told that the doors would be fixed by the end of June. Again, I work in the sector. I know they won't. There's the gateway 3, which is the process you have to go through in order to get any of these works signed off through the building safety regulator. There's backlog. There's also not enough fire door fitters because everybody's doing it at the same time. So they're going off where the money is. So I knew they wouldn't. But what they had to do then is put in mitigation. So I waited until the end of June, and surprisingly enough, nothing happened. So I then raised another with all of the measurements for the doors, a breakdown of those that I'm looking at that have got broken intumescent seals. Well, actually, they haven't got intumescent seals in this block. What they've got is cold seals, which are for smoke. So nothing for fire. They've got 30mm gaps at the bottom. So again, compartmentation fails instantly, and the cores are visible in the doors. So they're not they're not solid. And they've got no intumescent seals behind the hinges. So you've got a metal hinge on a wooden frame. So it's basically they're just kindling in frames.
Mm.
So I raised it again through the portal. And I had a lovely phone conversation with somebody from West Midlands Fire Service who actually admitted that one of the reasons that they were so confused and suspicious is the level of detail I've been going into. I then put my case study up and I was contacted by somebody who told me who I needed to speak to next level up. So I did an email with a full breakdown, next level up. And the language that comes back is one of them talking about they work in collaboration with Birmingham City Council. They don't. They're an enforcement body. So then we did some digging and discovered that HMFRIS, I have to think about that acronym. They're currently doing an investigation. They did an inspection. They widened the scope. So they did an
Sorry,
inspection in October.
who's this? HM? Who are they? What's this?
That's His Majesty's Fire. They're basically they police the police service and the fire service. So they'll go in and they'll do the audits. And then they've widened the scope of the one for West Midlands Fire Service because of the language that they're using. They don't feel that they're fully understanding their enforcement duties. So I've sent information over to them as well because they don't.
Mm.
I asked them for a scope of the audit. They wouldn't give me one. They just said they'd turn up at some point last week. Wouldn't give me a scope. Said I wouldn't see a copy of it. Said to which I've already put in a Freedom of Information Act because I will. And it's just there's a two-tier system. So if you're living in a privately rented accommodation, West Midlands Fire Service and Birmingham City Council are auditing you and making sure that you're safe. If you live in a Birmingham City Council property, they're not, because it will cost them money to fix it. So here's my lovely bit of paper that says that we've done one. That's all we need to do.
Do you think the people that are putting their names to these forms going, yeah, that's safe, that's compliant, do you think they know that they're actually in,
Liable?
yeah.
No. I think I wouldn't work in the fire industry at the moment, same as I wouldn't work as a principal designer, because I think the risk outweighs the rewards. You've got to be so careful about what you're putting on these assessments, making sure that you're covering everything. Now you do get, and I know some fantastic fire risk assessors, but if they're sending out somebody who is more junior and he's coming out and he's auditing a property that's above the level of complexity he's qualified to do, then he's not necessarily going to be looking at the right information, because I would have been expecting him to come back with can't do it because I need somebody to come out, show me all of these areas, and I need access to these documents. You shouldn't be taking the word of the council that the documents exist. You should be looking at the documents and checking what they say.
So I recorded a podcast. It would go up before yours, so it would have been last week's podcast with Deepa. And she has a property in London which is shared ownership. And again, they had it all signed off as compliance, but then it found out that the company that was signing off had been struck off the register and the person had been suspended.
And
So
that is the thing. So it's a big failure, and it happens across all industries. It's not just social housing. Control of contractors. So if you're looking at outdated information, then you're going to be working from outdated information, and then what you're accepting is no longer valid, which is why you need to keep on top of your control of contracts. You need to keep on top of your documentation. There are several things that Birmingham City Council are suggesting that they might do, which is they sent me over, so their resident comms that they sent me over, a large chunk of it was suggesting that we check the fire doors. No, we're not competent. And in the fire risk assessment, it actually references the housing officer who checks the fire doors. Not unless they've got the right certification, they won't. It's a HRB, and we've currently got Grenfell on Netflix. You'd think that would focus their minds a little.
it just seems we're just blissfully unaware and sort of speed running into the next disaster, as far as I can work out. So
That's exactly it.
Birmingham City Council, as you say, that they've gone bankrupt. That's all in the press and whatnot. But how many properties do you think? And just you know,
618.
oh my
They
God,
have
around
600 and
618.
they have 618 HRBs. Now, in the two case studies, so they have 618 HRBs. Let's say only half of them are the size of Grenfell. You're looking at 30,000 people. They have 1.1 million customers. They have 59,000 properties. The risk profile was huge, and the risk profile for legacy HRBs is obviously greater than those that we're building now, because we're building them to code. This is built in the 60s. My block was built in the 60s, so it's got asbestos in it. You add extra bits on. It's the fire doors from the 90s. It's not even slightly up to code. It wasn't like the Building Safety Act was a surprise. Grenfell was 8 years ago.
Mhm.
5 years ago, I was working with housing associations, building their building safety cases, getting ready for it. So whoever did their risk management either isn't very good, or it's a deliberate risk strategy to save money. So we're doing compliance theatre. Here is the appearance of compliance, but we're not going to spend any money on anything.
Compliance theatre is a great. In fact, that will be the title of this podcast, and I see that all too often. I asked for the fire safety stuff for this building here, and it was delayed and delayed, and then when we got
Yeah.
it back, and I haven't done a big story on this one, I'm going to. Most of the things that were signed off within the last sort of few weeks, and you think, oh right, okay,
Yeah,
so you had to get that done before you could release that, so that's why we went through
yeah.
all the delaying of the report.
Well, that's exactly what I saw, Ben. So when I put the stage, when I called through and spoke to the housing officer who was incredibly rude, and the information I requested at the time wasn't just the CDM information, it was the fire safety strategy and the safety case file for the property I live in. And the day after, the fire risk assessment was done.
Yeah. Do you think these housing officers are compliant or complicit, or do you think they're just
They,
signing off to get onto the next job?
they're signing off to get on to the next job. I think they've got a high volume. I don't think they're competent. I think the lack of competence is lower down the levels, and the willful risk strategy, the risk strategy, somebody somewhere has looked at the risk and decided that the risk is worth taking in order to not spend any money.
Now, this brings me into, and it's hard not to sound like some conspiracy nut, isn't it? This brings me into the multiple layers that housing associations have
Hmm.
and why the senior leadership team go to such levels to make sure that they don't get emailed, they don't get contact. My own
Yeah,
contact management plan was all about it stopping, getting over the sort of wall, if you
yeah.
like, of the frontline staff. Because if
Hmm.
they knew, and when the same with Anwar, when his death, the CEO won't, Gareth, whatever his name was, went, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. I'm not resigning, and was eventually and rightfully forced to.
Yeah.
So, is it a deliberate ploy by the senior leadership team? Keep the people in the trenches untrained, uninformed, and that helps us.
It doesn't help them though. That's the thing that they're really not grasping because ignorance is no excuse. Coupled with the simple fact that they are ultimately responsible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if what you're using as a delaying tactic is people who don't know the law, you are ultimately responsible. So if, and we are now entering fire season as it is known, children are off, it's been very dry. So we're entering fire season with 618 HRBs in Birmingham that I would lay money have an equivalent level of fire risk assessment and fire safety audits, quarterly audits. And the risk there is to 30,000 people, potentially 30,000 people. So you can you can deny it to HRB in one of your responses to me, if you like. Ultimately, if something happens, you are the people who go to prison, and I am the person who shows that. I have raised it with the building safety regulator, the ombudsman, various levels of the council, the fire service, the people who investigate the fire service, and they used to be called the Ministry for Levelling Up. So
Mm.
they do the local government stuff. So I'm raising it everywhere I can because one of the ways that they made the people in this block feel better was the sprinkler system that they installed. So my last post, which seems to be getting quite a lot of engagement, which is bizarre, is about the sprinkler system. So the sprinkler system is when mounted on the wall. It's at the top of the wall. It's encased in plastic. It has a wax seal over the head. And the theory is the wax seal, which melts at 68 degrees, melts and releases all the water when there's a fire. That's brilliant if it can get to the fire and if it melts because the fire is close enough to it. They don't work in this kind of an environment, they're not for this kind of an environment. That's why they put them overhead because they cover the whole room. They put them not necessarily in the right place to spread, but they're using that as a way of making people feel safer. So they're telling people they're safe because well, you've got your sprinkler system and you've got your fire doors. Well, the fire doors aren't going to stop anything. I've got no evidence that they've tested the sprinkler system and there's signs of leakage coming from the pump house. It shouldn't be a staple block. It should be a simultaneous evacuation.
Look, I know, and I'm not going to mention them now because I can't mention them. I know four people who have been raising issues and are now being threatened with legal action, a term of lawfare. And
Mm-hmm.
it's all intimidation, silence, stop people speaking,
Yeah.
hide the truth, and will and even sort of belittling them and calling them out, sending the residents letters saying, "Oh, he's just a troublemaker. They're troublemakers. They don't know what they're talking about. This is safe." Have you been on the receiving end of any of this?
Not yet. What I'm receiving instead is just very, very patronizing emails. So I received one, I reported, I asked for the information again through the portal. So they put the QR code up. Once I started raising my concerns, surprisingly enough, a load of stuff went in the lobby. Report building safety and fire safety concerns here. And a load of that stuff went up in the lobby. So I've used that portal because I know that's recorded and it's also what they're measured against to request the information. The person who's getting back to me is an expert in asbestos, which is lovely, but I'd like an expert in fire.
Yeah.
And he keeps misquoting the Building Safety Act. So they told me that I didn't have the right to see this information until the certificate, the building was certified until they'd received the certificate, which is wrong. So legally, once the you don't have to have the building safety pack in place to register. But all buildings, legacy buildings, had to be registered by October 2023. I can't remember the exact date. But in order for people to live in it, you do. So the building hasn't been signed off, it hasn't been certified as yet, and there will be a delay on that because it's a delayed Gateway 3 process because the building safety regulator underestimated how many buildings there were, I think. So he's telling me that I can't have it until they've got the certifications. And I've gone back with sections of the Building Safety Act that tell them why I will have it, and also sections of the building safety regulator that pulls together for how you communicate with residents to remind them how they're supposed to be communicating the risks to residents. And it isn't stick a poster up with no date on it.
Again, it comes back to that compliance theatre, doesn't it?
Exactly. It is compliance theatre. That's where we are. And the issue I've got is there are 12 of the councils that I know of that are in special measures. What do you think's happening with theirs? And the reason why, apart from me living here, the reason why Birmingham to me should be a case study for looking at how we manage legacy HRBs is they have the highest number and they're in special measures. So London has the highest number of tower blocks overall, but it's split into a lot of boroughs. Birmingham isn't. So we've got 618. They've got 1.1 million customers, I believe, and 59,000 properties. And
Yeah.
they need to find £300 million.
So what role do you think overall the government should play? You've got a council that doesn't have the money, but it's clearly got lives at risk. Should the government come in with a bailout and make housing? Well, where would they start? But should they be
I
making
think
sure?
it, yeah, I think it should possibly go through the bill. I've only recently started thinking about how we would manage this because of I think the risks legacy is the legacy HRBs, and it should perhaps be managed through the building safety regulator, and they would have a list of contractors that are compliant and suitable contractors to do the work, and it'd be signed off at each stage that the work's being done. I don't think we can leave it in the hands of a council that where we who can't even organise it, the resolution of a bin strike. We're in month 8 of a bin strike.
That's fallen
They
off
just
like, the press. That was all the we were hearing about that a lot. That's still going on, is it?
It is, yeah. So we're still in bin strike, and we've also recently had one of the I think it's one of the commissioner's office. So they were overpaying into the pension pot, and you need to request that money back, which they haven't done, and that's a sizable several million again. So for some reason, it's either an awful lot of people who lack competence, or there's something else going on at Birmingham City Council. But whatever it is, I don't think they should be trusted with money.
See, I think the problem is so derouting those. You've got these
Mhm.
people that lack the ability, but they put their name to it, they sign, they automatically. So rather than being outspoken and getting sacked and sent down the road, they then get promoted, and you've got this whole level of middle management,
Yeah.
incompetent, don't know what to do, but they'll get someone to put their name to it, and then it just grows and grows and grows.
So I think we should be looking at summaries of all safety case files should be published. so they should be searchable. Fire door inspection records should be tagged, time-stamped, and auditable. Resident engagement, that needs to again be something that's up and audited, and we should only be using stay put where it's a standard. So I'm sorry for quoting the standard. It's BS 9991, and that would confirm that it's viable. And what that says is, if your compartmentation is not up to standard, don't use it, because compliance isn't a poster. It's a responsibility, and residents have a right to see what the plan is. Compliance theatre is it's not, I see, again, I'm not certain whether it is incompetence or whether it's economics, because risks cost money. So if something's going to cost money, we have this bit of paper, let's not look at it too deeply. Because if we look at it too deeply, we'll have to do work. We've got one, tick.
And this brings us back full circle to the guys that you're looking after who are stressed out because they know people are living in unsafe homes.
Exactly. And it's not going to get better until somebody steps in with very clear. I think it'll start to get better when we have our first prosecution.
And 8 years after Grenfell, nothing.
And that's what's worrying, because what we're seeing here is Grenfell. A lot smaller. We're nowhere near the size of Grenfell, but it wasn't just the cladding, it's also the compartmentation. And one of the residents was repeatedly raising there's an issue with the compartmentation and was ignored. And these poor people were calling the fire service when the building was on fire, begging to be rescued. And they were told that it was a stay-put building, and they'd be fine. And they weren't, because compartmentation failed. So what we're doing at the moment is we're doing that. And I genuinely do not think it's just happening in Birmingham and it's just happening in my block. I think it's 618 blocks in Birmingham. I would say it's the other councils that are also under special measures or struggling financially, and that's at least 12.
Do you know, me and my wife watched that Netflix documentary. And
I can't watch it.
Yeah, well, we both sat here in tears, the pair of us. I'm not saying that as some emotional punch for everyone. It really is a hard watch, especially when you're hearing those calls and seeing the survivors. And you know, look, mistakes happen, and let's say, okay, Grenfell was a horrific mistake, but if you don't learn from it, and there haven't been prosecutions in 8 years, and it's still happening now, then as a society we've failed, haven't we?
I just think that never again can't mean until next time. And also, we've already had next time. We just don't know their names yet.
Oh God, Mel. Yeah. Okay. Look, Mel. My warning to you now is watch out for lawfare. They're going to try and silence you, and you know you're raising your profile. You're putting things online, and you know kudos to you. You've got the support of me and thousands of others. You know, who need these issues raised. But watch out. My feeling is they'll try and silence you or discredit you.
I'm expecting an attempt to discredit.
Well, do what I do. Blow it out their ass. Come on the podcast and talk about it.
It's one of the reasons that I've made sure that I've got all of the receipts. So I photographed all of the. I've told them all the way along, Ben, who I am. I work in this sector. I audit for a living. I know what I'm doing.
Has it impacted any issues with where you work?
There's yes, so it's not impacted they've been very supportive.
Good.
And I can honestly say that my employees are not. We don't do this.
Good. All right, Mel. Look, that's. It's nice to end on a positive thing. So let's end it. We haven't mentioned them, and that's up to you. But let's end it on the fact that your employee is doing things by the book correctly and as they should be done.
Great, thank you.
Mel, thanks for coming on. Stay safe, stay in contact, and you know, keep up the good work.
Will do. Thanks, Ben.